It's April 10th, 1912, and the RMS Titanic is setting sail. This isn't just any ship. It's the largest, most luxurious vessel the world has ever seen, a true floating palace carrying everyone from the richest people on the planet to poor immigrants hoping for a new start in America. Now, the company that built it, the White Star Line, was so unbelievably confident in its state-of-the-art safety features that one of its executives made this incredibly bold public claim. This ship, he said, is unsinkable. And yet, just 4 days into its very first trip across the ocean, the pride of the White Star Line was gone. It was sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic.
So that is the massive question, isn't it? How on earth did the unsinkable ship sink? How did this absolute monument to modern engineering end in such a complete and utter catastrophe? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out.
To really get why the sinking was such a profound shock to the world, it was a symbol of progress, of ambition. It was, for all intents and purposes, a floating palace. Let's just talk about the cost for a second. It took $7.5 million to build back in 1912. It's $400 million, a staggering amount of money. And all that cash bought a level of opulence the high seas had literally never seen before. The first-class passengers had amenities that you'd only find in the world's most exclusive hotels. We're talking a heated swimming pool, a full gym, squash courts, even Turkish baths. This wasn't just transportation. It was a statement. So, you have this legend of an invincible, perfect ship. How did it all fall apart so spectacularly? A whole cascade of ignored warnings and terrible decisions that ultimately sealed the Titanic's fate. Let's just walk through that fateful day, April 14th. Over the course of the day, the ship's radio operators received 7, that's right, 7, separate warnings about ice fields in their path. But the chairman of the company was on board, and he was pushing the captain to make good time, to set a new speed record. So they just kept plowing ahead at almost 40 kilometers an hour, straight into a known ice field. Then, at 11:39 p.m., the lookout screams, "Iceberg, right ahead." And the conditions that night were just a perfect storm for disaster. It was a moonless night, which made the iceberg practically invisible against the black water. The ship was going so fast there was almost no time to react. And to make things even worse, in a moment of sheer panic, the steersman might have actually turned the wheel the wrong way at first, wasting precious seconds that could have made all the difference. Now here is the really crucial part. Even after they hit the iceberg, a lot of people on board were not worried. They truly believed in the ship's design. They trusted that its famous unsinkable engineering would keep them afloat. See, that unsinkable claim all hinged on this one revolutionary idea: watertight compartments. The whole of the ship was divided into 16 separate sections. The theory was simple. Even if you punched a hole in the ship and a few compartments flooded with water, you could just seal them off and the rest of the ship would stay buoyant. But here's the fatal flaw. The Titanic was designed to survive with up to 4 of those compartments flooded. Not 5, not 6, 4. The iceberg didn't just punch a hole. It scraped along the side of the ship, ripping open 6 compartments. And as those 6 filled with thousands of tons of seawater, the bow of the ship was pulled down. And that's when the real design failure kicked in. The water started spilling over the tops of the walls into the next compartment and then the next, one after another, just like water filling up an ice cube tray. The unsinkable design failed in a domino effect. The ship was doomed. And that catastrophic design flaw, when you combine it with all the other failures, is what turned this accident into one of the worst human tragedies in maritime history. Maybe the most shocking failure of all was the lifeboats. Because of outdated safety regulations and, let's be honest, a huge dose of overconfidence, the Titanic only carried enough lifeboats for about half of the 2,200 people on board. Think about that. Even in a perfect evacuation, over 1,000 people were essentially doomed from the start. And to make matters so much worse, in all the chaos and disbelief, many of the passengers just couldn't accept that the unsinkable ship was actually going down. The first lifeboats were launched partially empty. In fact, the very first boat, which had room for 65 people, was lowered into the Atlantic with only 28 people inside. For the 1,500 people who were left on that ship, their fate was sealed by the freezing cold water. We're talking -2 degrees Celsius. The ocean was literally colder than ice. Anyone who ended up in that water would succumb to hypothermia in a matter of minutes. But here's what might be the most heartbreaking twist in this whole tragedy. Help was nearby. Another ship was close enough to see the Titanic's distress signals, close enough that it could have saved almost every single person. That ship was the SS Californian. It had stopped for the night because of the very same ice field, just 37 kilometers away. But its radio operator had signed off for the night only minutes before the Titanic sent its first SOS call. The crew on the deck of the Californian could actually see the Titanic's emergency flares lighting up the sky, but their captain, he dismissed them. He thought they were just celebratory fireworks. By the time they understood the horrifying truth, it was too late.
The sinking of the Titanic was a massive global wake-up call.
Laws were written. The Solis Convention made it mandatory for ships to carry lifeboats for every single person on board. It required radio rooms to be staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it established the International Ice Patrol, whose entire job is to track icebergs. These rules, born from this one tragedy, are still saving lives today.
In 1985, a team of oceanographers finally found it, resting in two pieces almost 4 kilometers below the surface of the ocean.
But the wreck itself is now disappearing. There's a species of metal-eating bacteria that is slowly but surely consuming the ship's hull. Scientists predict that by 2030, the physical remains of the Titanic will be gone forever. Which brings us to a fascinating final thought. An Australian billionaire has plans to build Titanic 2, a perfect replica that will one day sail the same route. Now, in our modern world of satellite navigation and instant communication, it's easy to think a disaster like this could never happen again. But it really makes you wonder, what lessons from that night in 1912 still matter most? Is it about technology, or is it about human error, overconfidence, and ignoring the warnings right in front of us?